Hey third graders, happy Monday. I hope you're getting ready to start module number 3 tomorrow and you had some time today to get caught up and to relax from all of your hard work. Our bedtime story tonight, I actually found back at my parents' house, and my mom gave it to me, of a story that I'm sure you've heard of as a movie or you've heard of before, and it is Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. We were all sitting around the big kitchen table. It was Saturday morning, pancake morning. Mom was squeezing oranges for the juice, and Henry and I were betting on how many pancakes we could each eat, and Grandpa was doing the flipping. Seconds later, something flew through the air headed towards the kitchen ceiling and landed right on Henry. After we realized what the flying object was, only a pancake, we all laughed, and even Grandpa continued breakfast uneventfully. All the other pancakes landed in the pan, and all of them were eaten, even the one that landed on Henry's head. That night, touched off by the pancake incident at breakfast, Grandpa told us the best tall tale bedtime story he had ever told. Across an ocean, over lots of huge bumpy mountains, across 3 hot deserts and 1 small ocean, there lay the tiny town of Chew and Swallow. In most ways, it was very much like any other tiny town. It had a main street lined with stores and houses and trees and gardens, schoolhouses, and 300 people lived there with assorted cats and dogs. But there were no food stores in the town of Chew and Swallow. They didn't need any. The sky supplied all the food they could possibly want. The only thing that was really different about Chew and Swallow was its weather. It came 3 times a day, at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Everything that everyone ate came from the sky. Think about how much money that would save. Whatever the weather served, that was what they ate. But it never rained rain, and never snowed snow, and it never blew just wind. It rained things like soup and juice, and it snowed mashed potatoes and green peas, and sometimes the wind blew in storms of hamburgers. Can you imagine a hamburger storm coming at you? Oof. The people could watch the weather report on television in the morning, and they would even hear a prediction for the next day's food. When the townspeople went outside, they carried their plates, their cups, glasses, forks, spoons, knives, napkins, all with them. That way they would always be prepared for any kind of weather. If there were leftovers, and there usually were, people took them home and put them in the refrigerator in case they got hungry between the meals. The menu varied, and by the time they woke up in the morning, breakfast was coming down. After a brief shower of orange juice, low clouds of sunny-side-up eggs moved in, followed by pieces of toast, butter, and jelly sprinkled down for the toast, and most of the time it rained milk afterwards. For lunch one day, frankfurters already in their rolls blew in from the northwest at about 5 miles an hour. There were mustard clouds nearby, and the wind shifted to the east to bring in baked beans. A drizzle of soda finished off the meal. Dinner one night consisted of lamb chops, becoming heavy at times with occasional ketchup. Periods of peas and baked potatoes were followed by gradual clearing with a wonderful jello setting in the west. The sanitation department of Chew and Swallow had a rather unusual job for a sanitation department. It had to remove the food that fell on the houses and sidewalks and lawns. The workers cleaned things up after every meal and fed all the cats and dogs. Then they emptied some of it into the surrounding oceans for the fish and turtles and whales to eat. The rest of the food was put back into the earth so the soil would be richer for the people's flowers and gardens. Life for the townspeople was delicious until the weather took a turn for the worse. Chew and Swallow digest. Spaghetti ties up town. One day there was nothing but gorgonzola cheese all day long. You can see the people have clothespins on their nose because it's so stinky. The next day there was only broccoli, all overcooked. And the next day there were Brussels sprouts and peanut butter with mayonnaise. Another day there was a pea soup fog, and no one could even see where they were going. They could barely find the rest of the meal that got stuck in the fog. The food was getting larger and larger, and so were the portions. The people were getting frightened. Violent storms blew up frequently, and awful things were happening. One Tuesday, there was a hurricane of bread and rolls all day long into the night. There were soft rolls and hard rolls, some with seeds, some without seeds. There was white bread and rye and whole wheat toast. Most of it was larger than they had ever seen bread and rolls before. It was a terrible day. Everyone had to stay indoors. Roofs were damaged, and the sanitation department was beside itself. The mess took the workers 4 days to clean up, and the sea was full of floating rolls. To help out, the people piled up as much bread as they could in their backyards. The birds picked at it bit by bit, but it just stayed there, and it got staler and staler. There was a storm of pancakes one morning and a downpour of maple syrup that nearly flooded the town. A huge pancake covered the school. No one could get it off because it weighed so heavy that it closed the school. Lunch one day brought 15-inch drifts of cream cheese and jelly sandwiches. Everyone ate themselves sick, and the day ended with a stomachache. There was an awful salt and pepper wind accompanied by an even worse tomato tornado. People were sneezing themselves silly and running to avoid the tomatoes. The town was a mess. There were seeds and pulp everywhere. The sanitation department gave up. The job was too big, and everyone feared for their lives. They couldn't go outside most of the time, and many houses had been badly damaged by giant meatballs. Stores were boarded up, and there was no more school for children. Kind of sounds like what's happening right now. So a decision was made to abandon the town of Chew and Swallow. It was a matter of survival. The people glued together giant pieces of stale bread sandwich style with peanut butter, took the absolute necessities with them, and set sail on their rafts for a new land. After being afloat for a week, they finally reached a small coastal town, which welcomed them. The bread had held up surprisingly well enough for them to build temporary houses for themselves to live in. The children began school again, and the adults all tried to find places for themselves in the new land. The biggest change that they had to make was getting used to buying food at the supermarket. They found it odd that food was kept on shelves, packaged in boxes, cans, and bottles. Meat that had to be cooked was kept in large refrigerators, and nothing came down from the sky except rain and snow. The clouds above their heads were not made of fried eggs, and no one ever got hit by a hamburger again. And nobody dared to go back to Chew and Swallow to find out what happened to it. They were way too afraid. Henry and I were awake until the very end of Grandpa's story, and I even remember his goodnight kiss. The end. Can you imagine how crazy things would be if that's what the weather was like? Kind of a fun, imaginative story that I know you've heard of. And if you haven't seen the movie, this is a perfect time to go watch it. Joining me tomorrow night in our bedtime story for Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs Part 2. There's actually 2 stories. It's a series, so you'll have to see what happens next. Sweet dreams, readers. See you tomorrow.